You wake up one morning and realize the pain didn't leave with the night. It's still there, sitting quietly in your chest, heavier than yesterday, sharper than you expected. You thought time would soften it. You thought distance would heal it. You thought that if you stayed busy enough, distracted enough, strong enough, it would stop hurting. And yet, here you are, wondering a question you may be too afraid to say out loud. How do I protect my heart from being hurt again when it feels like the world keeps finding new ways to break it? We live in a time where heartbreak is almost normalized. We expect disappointment. We brace ourselves for loss. We enter relationships, opportunities, friendships, even acts of worship with a quiet fear humming beneath the surface, telling us, don't give too much, don't feel too deeply, don't open your heart fully, because when it breaks again, you may not survive it. And so many of us respond by building walls. Thick ones, high ones. We convince ourselves that numbness is safety, that detachment is strength, that loving less will hurt less. But somewhere deep inside, something feels wrong because the heart was not created to live in a cage. The heart was created to love. It was created to feel. It was created to attach. The question was never whether the heart would attach, but to what? And this is where so many of us get lost. We try to protect our hearts by closing them, when in reality, the heart was never meant to be protected by closure. It was meant to be protected by direction. When the heart hurts, it is tempting to blame love itself. We tell ourselves that loving is dangerous, that caring is a liability, that vulnerability is weakness. But love is not the enemy. Attachment is not the enemy. The enemy is misplacement. The enemy is when the heart takes something that was never meant to be its foundation and turns it into its home. Because anything you make your home, you give the power to destroy you when it leaves. We often think heartbreak comes from people leaving, betraying, disappointing, or failing us. But the deeper truth is this: the pain does not come from their departure alone. It comes from what their presence replaced in our hearts. When something other than the eternal becomes your anchor, its loss will feel like drowning. And this is why the same loss can break one person and humble another, devastate one heart and deepen another. It is not about what was lost. It is about where the heart was resting. If you want to protect your heart from being hurt again, you have to first understand what the heart actually is. The heart is not just an emotional organ. It is a spiritual center. It is the place where belief settles, where trust lives, where fear grows, where hope breathes. And whatever the heart leans on most will shape how it survives pain. A heart that leans on what is temporary will shatter when that temporary thing changes. A heart that leans on what is eternal may still ache, but it will not collapse. Many of us were never taught to love without losing ourselves. We were taught to give everything, to pour endlessly, to attach fully, without anchoring ourselves anywhere stable. And then when the person leaves, or the dream dies, or the future we imagined dissolves, we are left asking why it hurts so much. It hurts because the heart was homeless without realizing it. It had moved into something fragile and expected permanence. Protecting your heart does not mean loving less. It means loving correctly. It means loving in a way that does not demand from creation what only the Creator can provide. People are not meant to complete you. They are not meant to heal every wound, fill every emptiness, or carry the weight of your worth. When we place that burden on them, we not only set ourselves up for heartbreak, we set them up for failure. No human can carry the weight of divinity, and no heart survives trying to make one do so. There is a subtle difference between loving deeply and clinging desperately. One is rooted in trust. The other is rooted in fear. One gives freely while knowing that everything ultimately belongs to God. The other holds tightly, afraid that if it loosens its grip, everything will fall apart. And fear-based attachment will always lead to pain, because fear convinces the heart that loss is the end rather than a transition. If you want to protect your heart, you must first heal your understanding of loss. Loss is not always punishment. Loss is often redirection. Sometimes what leaves your life is not being taken from you, but being taken away from you because it was slowly replacing something far more important. Sometimes what breaks your heart is what saves your soul. We ask, why did this hurt me? But a better question is, what was I depending on that I should not have been? Because the pain is a teacher. It exposes the places where the heart leaned too heavily, loved too absolutely, trusted too completely in something that was never meant to hold that power. One of the most dangerous lies we believe is that if we get hurt once, the solution is to never let it happen again by closing ourselves off. But hearts do not heal by shrinking. They heal by realigning. A closed heart is not a protected heart. It is a lonely one. And loneliness is not safety. It is slow erosion. True protection begins when the heart knows where to return, when it knows that no matter who leaves, who disappoints, who fails, there is one who remains unchanged. When the heart is tethered to that reality, it becomes resilient. Not hard, not cold, but resilient. Resilience does not mean you stop feeling pain. It means pain no longer defines you. It means heartbreak no longer destroys your faith, your self-worth, or your ability to love again. It means you can cry without collapsing, grieve without losing hope, and love again without fear ruling your choices. Many people ask, how do I trust again after being hurt? And the answer is not by trusting people more carefully, but by trusting God more completely. When your trust in God is weak, every human failure feels catastrophic. When your trust in God is strong, human failure feels painful, but not faith, shattering. This does not mean you ignore red flags, tolerate abuse, or excuse harm. Protecting your heart also means honoring its boundaries. It means recognizing that love does not require self-erasure. It does not require enduring constant pain in the name of loyalty. The heart was entrusted to you. You are responsible for how it is treated, including how you allow others to treat it. Sometimes we confuse endurance with faith and suffering with virtue, but wisdom teaches us that not every door is meant to stay open, and not every relationship is meant to last forever. Letting go is not always weakness. Sometimes it is obedience. Sometimes it is mercy. Sometimes it is protection disguised as loss. Protecting your heart also means understanding that healing is not linear. There will be days you feel strong and days you feel shattered. Days when you believe you have moved on, and moments when a memory brings you to your knees. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. The heart heals in layers, not lines. Do not rush your heart. Do not shame it for feeling. Do not tell it to get over it. When it is still learning how to let go, healing is not about forgetting. It is about remembering without bleeding. It is about reaching a place where the memory no longer controls your present. One of the greatest protections for the heart is remembrance. When the heart remembers who is in control, it stops trying to control everything. When it remembers that nothing enters or leaves your life without divine permission, it stops personalizing every loss as rejection. Sometimes what you think is rejection is actually redirection. Sometimes what you think is abandonment is actually protection you do not yet understand. The heart breaks when it believes the story that this pain is meaningless, that it happened for no reason, that it defines your worth, that it means you are unlovable or disposable. These are the whispers that turn pain into poison. And the antidote is truth. The truth that nothing is wasted. Not your tears, not your heartbreak, not your nights of loneliness, not your prayers that felt unanswered. Every experience shapes the heart. The question is whether it shapes it toward bitterness or wisdom. Bitterness builds walls. Wisdom builds roots. A heart with roots may bend in the storm, but it does not uproot. If you want to protect your heart, you must also examine how you speak to yourself after being hurt. Many people internalize pain as a verdict on their worth. If I were enough, they wouldn't have left. If I were lovable, this wouldn't have happened. These thoughts cut deeper than the loss itself. They turn an external wound into an internal scar. Your worth was never granted by people, and it cannot be revoked by them. It was given by the one who created you. And until the heart fully believes that, it will continue to beg for validation from places that cannot provide it without condition. A protected heart knows its value before it is tested. An unprotected heart tries to discover its value through being chosen, needed, or desired by others. And when that external validation disappears, the heart collapses under the weight of doubt. Another way we expose our hearts to repeated pain is by ignoring patterns. Sometimes we don't just get hurt once, we get hurt in the same way, by the same type of person, in the same dynamic, over and over again. And we tell ourselves it's bad luck, or destiny, or timing. But often it is an unhealed wound seeking familiarity. The heart is drawn to what it knows, even if what it knows hurts. And until that wound is addressed, the heart will continue to confuse intensity with love, chaos with passion, and inconsistency with depth. Protecting your heart means doing the inner work of healing what keeps drawing you toward what breaks you. Healing requires honesty, honest reflection, honest self-accountability, not blame, but awareness. Awareness of where your boundaries failed, where your intuition whispered and you ignored it, where fear of loneliness convinced you to accept less than you deserved. This is not about self-condemnation. It is about self-respect, and self-respect is a form of gratitude for the heart you were given. A protected heart is not one that never breaks. It is one that knows how to return to its source when it does. It knows where to place its pain. It knows how to turn sorrow into supplication, loss into longing for something higher, disappointment into deeper reliance. Pain either pushes you away from God or pulls you closer, and the direction it takes depends on whether the heart believes that God is near or distant in its suffering. A heart that knows it is seen, known, and held, even in its pain, will not drown in that pain. There is a profound difference between guarding your heart and hardening it. Guarding your heart means you choose carefully what you let in. Hardening your heart means you stop letting anything in at all. One preserves love, the other kills it. Love is not what breaks the heart. Expectation is. Attachment without surrender is. Loving without remembering that everything belongs to God is. When you love with open hands instead of clenched fists, loss still hurts, but it does not destroy. This does not mean you love lightly. It means you love consciously. You love while knowing that every blessing is temporary, every person is a trust, and every connection is on loan. And when the loan ends, you grieve, but you do not accuse God of injustice. One of the hardest lessons for the heart is accepting that closure does not always come in the form of answers. Sometimes the heart must learn to let go without understanding why, and this is where trust is tested. Not when things make sense, but when they don't. If you wait for closure from people, you may wait forever. But when you seek closure from God, it comes in the form of peace, not explanations. And peace is a far greater protection than answers ever could be. Protecting your heart also means being careful with comparison. When you compare your healing timeline to someone else's, you reopen wounds. When you compare your story to someone else's highlight reel, you undermine your progress. Healing is personal, pain is personal, and so is the journey back to wholeness. Your heart is not weak because it was hurt. It is brave because it loved. It is alive because it felt. And it is worthy of care, patience, and compassion. Sometimes we think the goal is to never feel pain again, but the real goal is to reach a place where pain no longer makes you lose yourself. where it no longer makes you abandon your values, your faith, or your capacity to hope. A protected heart is not afraid of love. It is anchored in something stronger than love. It is anchored in faith. And faith does not eliminate pain, but it gives it meaning. Every time your heart was hurt, it learned something. It learned what it needs. It learned what it cannot accept. It learned where it was too attached and where it needs to be more grounded. Do not waste those lessons by retreating into fear. Fear tells you to build walls. Faith tells you to build foundations. Walls isolate. Foundations support. And the heart was created to stand, not hide. You do not protect your heart by becoming unreachable. You protect it by becoming rooted. Rooted in truth. Rooted in purpose. Rooted in the knowledge that no loss can take from you what was written for you, and no heartbreak can diminish what was meant for you. And when the heart understands that, it still feels, it still loves, it still risks, but it no longer loses itself in the process. We often think that the safest way to protect the heart is to close it, to limit how much it feels, to reduce how much it hopes, to shrink how much it loves. After being hurt, this instinct feels logical, even wise. The heart says, I will never let anyone get that close again. Believing distance is protection. But the heart was not created to survive by shrinking. It was created to survive by knowing where it belongs. A closed heart is not a protected heart. It is a heart that has mistaken numbness for safety. And numbness is not peace. It is simply pain that has gone quiet. The heart is designed to attach. This is not a flaw, it is part of its nature. The real danger is not attachment itself, but misattachment. When the heart takes something temporary and treats it as permanent, when it leans on something fragile, as if it were unbreakable, pain becomes inevitable. The problem is not that the heart loves too much, but that it loves without an anchor. And without an anchor, every storm feels like the end. To orient the heart correctly means teaching it where its ultimate dependence should rest. It means allowing the heart to love people, experiences, and blessings without making them the source of its stability. Because the moment something created becomes the heart's home, its departure feels like eviction from life itself. This is why loss can feel so violent, so disorienting, so unbearable. Not because the thing was evil, but because it was asked to play a role it was never meant to fulfill. When the heart is properly oriented, it understands that everything in this world is on loan. People are not possessions, they are trusts. Moments are not guarantees, they are gifts. And gifts, by definition, are not owned. They are received with gratitude and released with humility. This orientation does not remove pain when something ends, but it changes the quality of that pain. It becomes grief without despair, sadness without collapse, loss without the feeling of total annihilation. Many people fear that if they stop clinging, they will stop caring. But the opposite is true. When the heart is oriented toward what is eternal, it becomes freer to love creation more purely. Love becomes less demanding, less fearful, less desperate. It no longer says, stay or I will break, but instead says, you are a blessing, not my lifeline. This kind of love is lighter, healthier, and more resilient. Correct orientation also teaches the heart that safety does not come from control. You cannot protect your heart by controlling outcomes, people, or futures. Control is exhausting and it feeds anxiety. Protection comes from surrender, from knowing that what is meant to stay will stay, and what is meant to leave will leave, without taking your soul with it. When the heart knows where it returns at the end of every loss, it stops panicking at the possibility of pain. The heart that is oriented correctly is not fearless, but it is grounded. It still feels deeply. It still risks love. It still opens itself to connection, but it does so with awareness, knowing that its center is not dependent on what it holds, but on what holds it. And in that grounding, the heart learns that it does not need to be close to be safe. it needs to be placed where loss cannot reach its core. When heartbreak happens, our instinct is often to see it as evidence that love itself is dangerous. We tell ourselves that caring too much is what caused the pain, that opening the heart was the mistake, that vulnerability is something to regret. But this understanding misses a deeper truth. Love does not wound the heart, misdirected dependence does. What truly breaks the heart is not that someone left, changed, or failed, but that their presence had quietly taken the place of something far more stable within us. Every heartbreak exposes a hidden contract the heart made without realizing it. A promise that says, as long as you stay, I am okay. Or, as long as this works out, I can survive. When that condition is removed, the heart collapses under the weight of fear and emptiness. The pain feels unbearable, not because the loss is large, but because the heart had handed over its sense of safety to something that was never meant to hold it. And when that foundation crumbles, everything built on it shakes. This is why two people can experience the same loss and emerge completely differently. One is shattered, angry, and spiritually disconnected, while the other is wounded but reflective, softened, and closer to God. The difference is not strength of character or depth of love, but where the heart was anchored. When the heart's deepest reliance is placed on creation, any failure of that creation feels like betrayal by life itself. But when reliance rests on the Creator, loss becomes painful without being faith, destroying. Heartbreak then becomes a mirror. It reflects back to us where we placed our ultimate trust, our deepest hope, our sense of worth and belonging. It reveals what we expected to give us peace, and often what it reveals is uncomfortable. It shows us that we expected a person to save us from loneliness, a relationship to give us purpose, or a dream to validate our existence. When those expectations are unmet, the pain is not just grief, it is disillusionment. But this disillusionment, as painful as it is, carries mercy within it. It is an invitation to reorient the heart, to remove the weight of divinity from human shoulders, to stop demanding permanence from what was never promised to last. Loss strips away illusions, not to leave us empty, but to show us what cannot be taken away. When we understand heartbreak in this way, it stops being a sign that love failed and starts becoming a sign that dependence was misplaced. And this shift changes everything. Instead of retreating into fear, the heart begins to learn. Instead of closing itself off, it becomes wiser. It learns how to love without worshiping, how to attach without clinging, how to care without collapsing when things change. This does not make loss painless. Tears will still fall, longing will still ache, memories will still surface. But the heart is no longer destroyed by the weight of its own expectations. It no longer interprets loss as proof of worthlessness or abandonment by God. Instead, it begins to see heartbreak as a form of guidance, a painful but precise correction that gently moves the heart back to where it was always meant to rest. Many people believe that emotional strength comes from learning how to control outcomes, how to predict disappointment before it happens, how to guard themselves so tightly that nothing unexpected can reach them. After being hurt, this desire for control feels natural. The heart says, if I can manage every variable, I can avoid pain. But control is an illusion, and chasing it only deepens anxiety. True resilience is not built by controlling life, but by trusting the one who controls it. When trust in God is weak, every human failure feels catastrophic. A broken promise feels like betrayal by the world. A relationship ending feels like the end of meaning. A door closing feels like proof that nothing good is ahead. The heart reacts this way because it believed that its future depended on that person, that plan, or that outcome. And when that belief collapses, the heart panics, grasping for something else to hold on to. Trust in God reshapes how the heart experiences loss. It does not erase pain, but it contains it. When trust is present, Disappointment hurts without destroying faith, grief weighs without suffocating hope, and fear whispers without ruling decisions. The heart understands that what was lost was never the source of provision, safety, or purpose, but merely a means through which those things were experienced for a time. This kind of trust does not come from passive belief, but from repeated surrender, from choosing again and again to place outcomes back where they belong, from reminding the heart that it is not responsible for controlling how everything unfolds. The heart's role is not to predict the future, but to remain connected to the one who already sees it. Resilience grows when the heart learns that loss is not a verdict. It is not a declaration that you are unworthy, abandoned, or being punished. It is simply part of the movement of life, guided by a wisdom far beyond what the heart can perceive in the moment. And when the heart believes that wisdom is merciful, it stops resisting every change as a threat. Many people fear that trusting God means becoming passive, accepting harm, or staying in situations that hurt. But true trust sharpens discernment rather than dulling it. It gives the heart clarity instead of confusion. It allows you to walk away from what is damaging without fear that you are losing everything. Because when your trust is anchored in God, leaving what harms you does not feel like stepping into nothingness. The heart that trusts God still makes choices. It still sets boundaries. It still feels disappointment. But it does not carry the unbearable burden of believing that everything depends on its own efforts or on other people's consistency. This releases the heart from constant tension and self-blame. It no longer asks, "What did I do wrong?" every time something ends, but instead asks, "What am I being taught?" Over time, this trust transforms pain into depth. It turns heartbreak into humility. It softens the heart rather than hardening it. And resilience emerges not as emotional numbness, but as the quiet strength of a heart that knows it can be hurt without being destroyed, disappointed without being abandoned, and uncertain without being lost. Protecting the heart is not only a spiritual act, it is also an act of awareness and responsibility. Many people assume that if their intentions are pure, their hearts will automatically be safe. But sincerity alone does not prevent harm when boundaries are absent. A heart can be deeply faithful and still be repeatedly wounded if it does not learn how to recognize its own limits. Healing, therefore, requires more than prayer and patience. It requires honest self-examination and the courage to respond to what that examination reveals. One of the most painful patterns people experience is being hurt in the same way, again and again, by different faces but familiar dynamics. This repetition is not coincidence. It often points to an unhealed wound within the heart that keeps seeking resolution through the same experiences. The heart becomes drawn to what feels familiar, even when familiar has always been painful. Until that wound is addressed, the heart confuses intensity with love, attention with commitment, and endurance with virtue. Inner work begins when we stop asking only why others hurt us and start asking what within us allowed the pattern to continue. This is not about blame or self-criticism. It is about self-respect. It is about recognizing that the heart entrusted to you deserves protection, not just sacrifice. Awareness allows the heart to learn from pain instead of reliving it. It transforms suffering into insight rather than resentment. Boundaries are often misunderstood as barriers to love, but in reality, they are what allow love to remain healthy. Without boundaries, the heart overextends, gives beyond its capacity, and tolerates what slowly erodes it. Many people stay in situations that drain them emotionally or spiritually because they confuse patience with permission. But patience does not require self-betrayal, and faith does not demand that you endure harm in silence. Protecting the heart means learning when to step back, when to say no, and when to walk away, even if the heart still feels attached. It means honoring the signals that discomfort sends instead of dismissing them as weakness. Intuition is not the enemy of faith, it is often a form of guidance. Ignoring it repeatedly trains the heart to accept pain as normal, and over time, this erodes self-worth. Healing also requires compassion toward oneself. Many people shame themselves for past choices, replaying mistakes as evidence of foolishness. But the heart cannot heal in an environment of constant judgment. It heals through understanding why loneliness felt unbearable, why attention felt like love, why fear of loss outweighed self-respect. When the heart is met with compassion instead of condemnation, it becomes open to change. As awareness grows, the heart begins to choose differently, not because it has become cold, but because it has become conscious. It recognizes patterns sooner. It listens to discomfort instead of overriding it. It no longer sacrifices peace to avoid solitude. This is not hardness, it is maturity. It is the quiet strength of a heart that has learned that loving wisely is not a betrayal of faith, but an expression of gratitude for the trust it was given. There is a profound difference between guarding the heart and hardening it, yet many people confuse the two. After repeated hurt, the natural response is often to build walls, to shield every corner of the heart from potential pain. Walls feel protective because they create distance, but in truth, they isolate. They prevent the heart from experiencing the fullness of life, from connecting meaningfully, from trusting again. Hardening may stop immediate pain, but it also stops growth, joy, and the capacity for love. Guarding, on the other hand, is not about avoidance, it is about rootedness. It is about creating a center within the heart that is steady, resilient, and anchored in truth. A heart that is rooted knows that love, loss, and disappointment are part of life. It does not attempt to avoid them entirely, but learns how to remain stable through them. It bends under pressure, but does not break. It feels deeply, but does not collapse. It loves fully, but does not rely on what is fragile for its survival. These roots are nourished by faith, by remembrance, and by clarity of purpose. They grow stronger through reflection, through awareness of patterns, and through repeated realignment with what is eternal rather than temporary. Hardness often masquerades as strength, convincing the heart that shutting down is protection. But closed hearts, while appearing unbreakable, are actually brittle. They may resist the wind, but they cannot withstand the storm. They survive by avoidance rather than understanding, by denial rather than adaptation. A protected heart, by contrast, thrives not by pretending pain does not exist, but by acknowledging it, processing it, and placing it in the right perspective. It learns from pain rather than being consumed by it, and transforms vulnerability into wisdom rather than weakness. The difference is also seen in the way the heart engages with relationships and experiences. A hardened heart fears closeness, mistrusts generosity, and measures every interaction with suspicion. It is reactive, defensive, and constrained. A rooted heart, however, approaches others with discernment, setting healthy boundaries while remaining open to connection. It does not depend on others for its sense of worth, but it recognizes the value of shared experiences and emotional intimacy. It is neither reckless nor indifferent. It navigates life with both courage and care. Rootedness also allows the heart to accept impermanence gracefully. When the heart knows where its true security lies, it can release what is temporary without panic. Loss is felt, tears are shed, memories linger, but the core remains intact. The heart understands that no departure can undo what was given by the Creator, and no heartbreak can diminish what was written for it. This perspective does not make the heart invulnerable, but it does make it resilient, able to face challenges without losing itself. Finally, a protected heart is able to love freely. It still risks, still hopes, still trusts, because it knows that its center does not depend on what can be taken away. Its roots hold it steady, even when circumstances shift, people fail, or outcomes are uncertain. It grows with each experience, nourished by both joy and pain, and develops a capacity for depth that hardened hearts cannot reach.